Success often hinges on how quickly you think and how clearly you speak. Mastering both turns challenges into opportunities and conversations into achievements. Think fast. Talk smart. Crucial communication techniques for success. Written by Caliph Draven and published by Listen, Grow Sleep. Introduction. The challenge of spontaneous speaking. Have you ever been put on the spot and asked to speak without preparation? Perhaps your boss suddenly turned to you in a meeting and asked for your opinion. Or maybe you were at a social gathering when someone unexpectedly asked you to give a toast. How did you feel in that moment? For most of us, these spontaneous speaking situations trigger immediate anxiety. Our hearts race, our palms sweat, and our minds seem to go completely blank. We struggle to find the right words, and what comes out often feels disjointed and inadequate. Welcome to Think Fast, Talk Smart, Crucial Communication Techniques for Success. I'm excited to take you on a journey to master the art of spontaneous speaking, the ability to communicate effectively in unplanned, off-the-cuff situations. What if I told you that speaking spontaneously is a skill that can be learned? That with the right techniques and mindset, you can transform from someone who dreads being called on to someone who welcomes these opportunities? The truth is, spontaneous speaking situations are far more common than planned presentations. They happen in meetings, job interviews, networking events, and everyday conversations. And often, these impromptu moments can have a greater impact on how others perceive us than our carefully rehearsed presentations. In this audiobook, we'll explore proven techniques to help you think quickly, speak confidently, and communicate effectively in any situation. These techniques aren't just theoretical, they're practical tools that have been tested and refined through years of research and real-world application. We'll begin by addressing the most common barrier to effective spontaneous speaking: anxiety. You'll learn how to manage your nerves so they energize rather than paralyze you. Then, we'll dive into a 4-step process that will transform how you approach spontaneous speaking situations. First, you'll learn how to get out of your own way, to stop overthinking and allow your natural communication abilities to shine through. Second, you'll discover how to reframe speaking situations as opportunities rather than threats. Third, you'll master the art of truly listening before responding. And finally, you'll learn how to structure your thoughts quickly using proven frameworks that make your communication clear, compelling, and memorable. By the end of this audiobook, you'll have the tools to speak confidently in any situation, whether you have days to prepare or just seconds. You'll no longer dread being put on the spot. Instead, you'll welcome these opportunities to share your thoughts and make meaningful connections. So let's begin our journey to mastering the art of thinking fast and talking smart. Chapter 1. Managing Speaking Anxiety. Did you know that 85% of people report feeling nervous when speaking in public? And I suspect the other 15% simply aren't being honest. Public speaking consistently ranks among Americans' top fears, right up there with heights, spiders, and even death. A recent study from Chapman University found that speaking in front of others was among the top 5 fears reported by Americans, alongside terrorist attacks and identity theft. This fear is universal, but here's the good news: we can learn to manage it. Notice I said manage rather than overcome. This distinction is important. Anxiety isn't something we want to eliminate completely. It gives us energy, helps us focus, and signals that what we're doing matters. The goal isn't to get rid of anxiety, but to channel it productively. Think about how you feel when you're watching a nervous speaker present. Most of us feel uncomfortable, even awkward. We might nod encouragingly or disengage completely. And to the nervous speaker looking out at the audience, neither response is particularly helpful. Your primary job as a communicator, whether in planned or spontaneous situations, is to make your audience comfortable enough to receive your message. This doesn't mean your message needs to be sugar-coated. It can be challenging or even difficult to hear, but your audience needs to be in a receptive state, and that starts with you managing your own anxiety. Let me share 3 powerful techniques that can help you manage speaking anxiety, all based on solid research. The first technique addresses what happens in those crucial moments before you speak, when anxiety symptoms first appear. For most people, this is when the spiral begins. Your stomach churns, your legs shake, or you start to perspire. Then the negative self-talk kicks in. Oh no, I'm nervous. Everyone will notice. This is going to be a disaster. Research on mindful attention suggests a simple but powerful intervention. Greet your anxiety. When you notice those first physical symptoms, take a deep breath and acknowledge what's happening. This is me feeling nervous. I'm about to do something important. By simply acknowledging your anxiety as normal and natural, remember, 85% of people experience it, you can prevent it from spiraling out of control. This won't necessarily reduce the anxiety, but it will stop it from escalating and overwhelming you. The second technique involves reframing how you view the speaking situation. Most of us approach speaking as a performance, something with a right and wrong way to execute. If you've ever acted, sung, or danced on stage, you know that performances require hitting the right notes or lines at precisely the right moments. But presenting isn't a performance. There's no single right way to do it, just better and worse approaches. Instead of seeing speaking as a performance, try viewing it as a conversation. Right now, I'm having a conversation with you. I'm not performing for you. This shift in perspective can dramatically reduce anxiety. Here are some practical ways to make your speaking more conversational. Start with questions. Questions are inherently dialogic. They invite engagement. They can be rhetorical or direct, but they signal that you're in conversation with your audience rather than performing for them. When I prepare for presentations, I often outline using questions rather than bullet points. Instead of listing topics, I write down questions I plan to answer. This naturally puts me in a conversational mindset. Also, use conversational language. Nervous speakers often distance themselves, not just physically, by standing far from the audience, but linguistically as well. They might say things like, "One must consider the ramifications," or "Today we'll cover step 1, step 2, step 3. Instead, use inclusive, conversational language. This is important for all of us. Or, first, what we need to do is this, and second, you should consider that. Notice the difference in tone and connection. The third technique for managing anxiety comes from research. I began as an undergraduate, studying with psychologist Philip Zimbardo. We found that bringing yourself into the present moment, rather than worrying about future consequences, significantly reduces nervousness. Most speaking anxiety stems from concern about future states. Will I get the grade? Will I secure the funding? Will people laugh at my jokes? These worries pull us out of the present and into an imagined future. By becoming present-oriented, you focus on the now rather than these future concerns. There are many ways to achieve this present focus. Physical activity can help. I know a professional speaker who does 100 push-ups backstage before presenting to large audiences. While that's extreme, even a brief walk around the building can bring you into the present moment. Athletes often listen to specific music before competing to get in the zone, another way of becoming present-focused. You can try counting backward from 100 by an unusual number like 17. This requires such concentration that it forces you into the present. My personal favorite technique is saying tongue twisters. This not only demands present focus, or you'll say it wrong, but also warms up your voice, something nervous speakers often neglect to do. Let me share my favorite tongue twister. I slit a sheet I slit, and on that slitted sheet, I sit. Try saying that 3 times quickly. When you're focused on getting the tongue twister right, you're fully in the present moment, not worrying about your upcoming presentation. These 3 techniques, greeting your anxiety, reframing speaking as conversation, and becoming present-oriented, form a powerful toolkit for managing speaking anxiety. They won't eliminate nervousness completely, but they'll help you channel that energy productively rather than being paralyzed by it. Remember, some anxiety is good. It shows you care about communicating effectively. The key is managing it so it serves you rather than sabotages you. With your anxiety under control, you're ready to tackle the core skills of spontaneous speaking. In the next chapter, we'll explore the 4-step process that will transform how you respond in impromptu speaking situations. Chapter 2, the 4 steps to spontaneous speaking. Now that we've addressed anxiety management, let's dive into the heart of spontaneous speaking, the 4 critical steps that will help you respond effectively in any unplanned speaking situation. Whether you're answering an unexpected question in a meeting, giving an impromptu toast, or providing feedback on the spot, these 4 steps will guide you toward a clear, confident response. Step 1. Get out of your own way. The first and perhaps most challenging obstacle to spontaneous speaking is ourselves. We get in our own way by striving for perfection, searching for the right answer, or overthinking our response. This perfectionism is actually counterproductive. When we try too hard to be brilliant, we often freeze up completely. Our internal editor becomes so active that it prevents us from saying anything at all. Let me demonstrate this with a simple exercise you can try right now. For the next 30 seconds, look around your environment and point to different objects. But here's the twist. Call each object anything except what it actually is. For example, point to a chair and call it elephant, or point to a lamp and call it pizza. If you try this exercise, you'll likely notice something interesting. Your brain wants to help you get it right by planning ahead. You might find yourself pre-selecting objects and deciding what incorrect names to give them. Or you might notice patterns emerging, perhaps naming everything as animals or foods. This is your brain trying to be helpful, but in spontaneous speaking situations, this planning actually slows you down and makes you less responsive to the moment. The key is to train yourself to respond in the moment rather than react after thinking. To react means to act again. You think first, then act on that thought. This process takes too long in spontaneous situations. Instead, we want to respond genuinely and authentically in the moment. One of my favorite maxims from improvisation applies perfectly here: dare to be dull. This might sound counterintuitive, especially for high achievers, but when you give yourself permission to be ordinary rather than striving for brilliance, you often reach that brilliance naturally. It's when you set greatness as your target that it becomes most elusive. You over-evaluate, over-analyze, and ultimately freeze up. By daring to be dull, by lowering the stakes, you free yourself to respond naturally, which often leads to your most authentic and effective communication. Step 2. See speaking as an opportunity. The second step in our process involves changing how we perceive spontaneous speaking situations. Instead of viewing them as threats or challenges, we need to see them as opportunities. When I coach executives on handling Q&A sessions with media or investors, many initially approach these interactions as adversarial, me versus them. This defensive mindset limits their responses to the bare minimum needed to protect themselves. But what if we reframe these situations? A Q&A session isn't a threat. It's an opportunity to clarify your message, understand what's on people's minds, and expand on your ideas. When you see it as an opportunity to connect rather than a challenge to survive, your entire approach changes. The same applies to all spontaneous speaking situations. When your boss asks you to introduce someone at a corporate dinner, you can think, "Great, thank you for the opportunity," rather than, "Oh no, I better not mess this up." This shift in perspective isn't just psychological, it manifests in how you physically and verbally respond. You become more open, more generous with information, and more connected to your audience. Step 3. Slow down and listen. The third step might seem counterintuitive for thinking fast, but it's crucial. Slow down and truly listen before responding. In spontaneous situations, we often feel pressured to reply immediately. We listen just enough to get the gist of what's being asked, then start formulating our response while the other person is still speaking. This means we miss crucial information and context that could help us respond more effectively. Remember, as a communicator, your primary job is to serve your audience. If you don't fully understand what they're asking or what they need, you can't fulfill that obligation. Slowing down to listen completely before responding accomplishes several things. First, it ensures you actually understand the question or situation before you start speaking. Second, it gives you valuable processing time to organize your thoughts. Third, it demonstrates respect for the other person and shows that you value their input. Fourth, it helps you pick up on nuances, emotions, and subtext that might be crucial to an appropriate response. One of my favorite maxims captures this perfectly. Don't just do something, stand there. In a culture that values quick action, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pause, listen, and fully absorb what's happening before responding. Step 4. Use structure in your response. The final step in our process is perhaps the most practical. Respond using a clear structure. Structure is the secret weapon of effective spontaneous speakers. It increases what cognitive scientists call processing fluency, the ease with which we process information. Research shows we process structured information about 40% more effectively than unstructured information. Think about how we remember phone numbers. We chunk them into a structure, 3 digits, 3 digits, 4 digits, rather than trying to remember 10 separate digits. Structure helps both you as the speaker organize your thoughts and your audience understand and retain your message. Let me share 2 powerful structures you can use in almost any spontaneous speaking situation. The first is problem solution benefit. You start by identifying the issue or challenge, then present a way to address it, and finally explain the advantages of implementing your solution. This structure works particularly well for persuasive responses. It doesn't always have to frame the first part as a problem. You can adapt it to opportunity solution benefit if you're discussing a positive situation that could be enhanced rather than a negative one that needs fixing. The second structure is what so what, now what. You begin by explaining what the situation or concept is, then why it matters, and finally what action should be taken next. This versatile framework works excellently for answering questions, providing explanations, or even making introductions, by adapting it to who, so, what, now, what. These structures are valuable because they solve half the challenge of spontaneous speaking. When put on the spot, you have to figure out both what to say and how to say it. Having these structures ready means you only need to focus on the content. The structure is already handled. With practice, these frameworks become second nature. I often use the what so what now what structure when answering my children's questions. They don't realize I'm using a specific framework, but it helps me provide clear, complete answers, even to unexpected questions. The beauty of these structures is that they set both you and your audience free. They give you a clear path to follow when responding, and they help your audience follow your thinking easily. As counterintuitive as it might seem, structure actually creates freedom rather than constraint. To summarize our 4-step process for effective spontaneous speaking, first, get out of your own way by letting go of perfectionism and allowing yourself to respond naturally. Second, reframe speaking situations as opportunities rather than threats. Third, slow down and truly listen before responding. And finally, use simple structures to organize your thoughts quickly and communicate clearly. These 4 steps form a powerful system for handling any spontaneous speaking situation with confidence and clarity. With practice, they'll become second nature, allowing you to think fast and talk smart no matter what speaking challenges come your way. In the next chapters, we'll explore each of these steps in greater depth, providing more techniques and practical exercises to help you master the art of spontaneous speaking. Chapter 3. The Power of Yes and Thinking. One of the most valuable lessons from improvisation is the concept of yes and, a powerful mindset that can transform your spontaneous speaking abilities. In improv theatre, performers use yes and as a guiding principle. When one actor introduces an idea, others accept it, yes, and build upon it, and. This creates a collaborative dynamic that allows scenes to develop naturally. Many of us, however, operate with a no, but mindset. We instinctively look for flaws or problems with what others say. While critical thinking is valuable, leading with negation often shuts down conversation and limits possibilities. The yes and approach doesn't mean blindly agreeing with everything. It's about acknowledging what's been offered before adding your perspective, creating collaboration rather than confrontation. Consider this example. In a meeting, a colleague suggests a new marketing approach with some obvious flaws. A no but response might be, "That won't work because our budget is too limited." A yes and response would be, "I appreciate your creative thinking about reaching new customers, and we should also consider how to make it work within our budget constraints." The second response acknowledges the value in the original idea before adding a new consideration, keeping the conversation moving forward constructively. Yes, and thinking is particularly valuable in spontaneous speaking because it reduces the pressure to have the perfect response, creates connection rather than division, keeps conversations flowing toward productive outcomes, helps you think more creatively by seeing opportunities rather than just problems. Let's apply this to a real situation. Someone asks about a project that's behind schedule. A defensive response might be, "We're behind because the data we received was incomplete." A yes and approach would be, "You're right that we're behind our timeline, and we've identified the incomplete data as the main challenge. We're now implementing a verification process to prevent similar delays." This response acknowledges the reality and then adds context and forward-looking information. Yes, and thinking also works internally. When your first thought is, "I'm not sure about this," add, "and that's okay. I can share what I do know and be honest about what I'm still figuring out." The beauty of this approach is that it creates momentum. Each acknowledgement and addition moves the conversation forward, generating possibilities rather than resistance. This momentum helps you speak fluidly even when uncertain, creating bridges between ideas until you've constructed a complete response. To incorporate yes and thinking into your speaking, notice your default response patterns. Do you tend to begin with negation? Practice leading with acknowledgement before adding your perspective. Use bridging phrases like "building on that idea" or "that's interesting and it makes me think about." Apply this approach internally by accepting your initial thoughts as starting points rather than judging them. Remember, yes and doesn't mean abandoning critical thinking. It's about creating a constructive approach to communication that generates possibilities rather than shutting them down. Chapter 4. Mastering the art of storytelling on the spot. Stories are our most powerful communication tool. They engage emotions, illustrate points memorably, and create connection. But can you tell effective stories spontaneously? Absolutely, and this skill can transform your spontaneous speaking. When you illustrate points with brief, compelling stories, you transform abstract ideas into concrete experiences that your audience can relate to and remember. Storytelling is particularly effective in spontaneous speaking because stories engage both logical and emotional parts of the brain. Information in story form is up to 22 times more memorable than facts alone. Personal stories create empathy and understanding. Stories simplify complex ideas in immediately graspable ways. The challenge is having relevant stories ready when needed. Here's how to build your story bank and access it in spontaneous situations. Building your story bank. Consciously collect stories from your own experience. Most of us have dozens of potentially useful stories, but haven't catalogued them for easy access. Reflect on key experiences from different domains: professional challenges, personal growth moments, lessons learned, funny incidents, and meaningful interactions. For each story, identify the principle it illustrates. A story about overcoming a technical challenge might demonstrate persistence, creativity, or the importance of asking for help. These connections create mental tags that help you retrieve the right story when needed. Keep your stories brief. 30 to 90 seconds is ideal for spontaneous speaking. Practice telling them aloud, focusing on the essential elements: situation, challenge, action, and result. Accessing stories spontaneously. When put on the spot, how do you find the right story? Try these techniques. Listen for story triggers like, Can you give an example? Or, have you experienced this? Use the point story point structure to sandwich your story between statements of your main message. Organize stories into categories like leadership challenges or innovation examples for quick mental scanning. Use the "this reminds me of" bridge when you need a moment to recall details, crafting stories on the fly. Sometimes you'll need to construct a story in the moment. Follow this framework. Start with a clear point. What principle do you want to illustrate? Choose a relevant experience, even if it's not a perfect match. Focus on concrete details that make the story vivid. Keep the arc simple: situation, challenge, action, result. Connect explicitly back to your point. Try this practice exercise. Choose a principle like integrity or resilience. Give yourself 30 seconds to recall a relevant experience, then 60 seconds to tell the story aloud. With practice, you'll develop the ability to quickly access and shape stories that illustrate your points effectively. Remember, authenticity matters more than polish. A genuine story told with conviction will always be more effective than a perfectly crafted narrative that feels rehearsed.
Chapter 5. Handling difficult questions and challenging situations.
Even skilled spontaneous speakers can be thrown off balance by difficult questions. Let's explore strategies for maintaining composure and responding effectively when under pressure. Understanding types of difficult questions. Recognizing the type of question you're facing helps you respond appropriately. Information-seeking questions come from people genuinely wanting to learn. Challenging questions test your knowledge or credibility. Loaded questions contain problematic assumptions. Hostile questions aim to undermine or embarrass you. Each type requires a different approach, but all benefit from the same fundamental principle. Maintain your composure. Your emotional state will influence how your response is received, regardless of your words. The PREP framework. One versatile structure for handling difficult questions is the PREP framework. Point, reason, example, point. Start with your main point, a direct answer if possible. Provide a reason that explains the why behind your answer. Illustrate with a concrete example. Conclude by restating your point. For example, if asked whether a new initiative is worth the investment, yes, this initiative is absolutely worth the investment. Point. The technology will significantly reduce costs while improving quality. Reason. In our pilot program, we saw a 30% cost reduction and 15% quality improvement in just 3 months. Example. This combination of lower costs and higher quality makes it one of our most promising investments. Point. This framework provides a complete, well-rounded response that addresses both logical and illustrative aspects of your answer. Techniques for specific challenges. When you don't know the answer. Sometimes you simply won't know the answer. In these situations, acknowledge it honestly. That's an excellent question, and I don't have all the information right now. Offer what you do know. What I can tell you is: commit to follow-up if appropriate. Bridge to related information you can address. Honesty about what you don't know builds credibility, as long as you handle it confidently. When faced with hostile questions. For hostile or antagonistic questions, acknowledge the concern without labeling the emotion. Reframe the question to focus on the underlying issue. Respond to the legitimate concern rather than the attack. Maintain a calm tone and use bridging statements to move to constructive territory when dealing with loaded questions. For questions with problematic assumptions, address the assumption directly. Your question assumes we've been ignoring feedback, but that's not the case. Provide correct information. Answer the legitimate part of the question. This blocking and bridging technique corrects false assumptions while still addressing the underlying issue. When you need time to think. To buy thinking time while staying engaged, paraphrase the question, ask a clarifying question, acknowledge the question's importance. The paradox of preparation. While this audiobook focuses on spontaneous speaking, Here's an important paradox. The more you prepare, the more spontaneous and natural your responses will seem. This doesn't mean scripting answers to every possible question, but rather anticipating likely questions in different contexts, thinking through your position on complex issues, practicing frameworks until they become second nature, reflecting on past challenging situations. This preparation creates a foundation of confidence that allows you to be truly present and responsive in the moment. The mindset of service. Perhaps the most powerful approach to difficult questions is adopting a mindset of service. When you view challenging questions as opportunities to provide value rather than threats to defend against, your entire orientation shifts. Ask yourself, how can I best serve this person right now? What do they really need from me? Sometimes they need information, sometimes reassurance, sometimes just to be heard. By focusing on serving rather than surviving, you'll respond more authentically and effectively. Remember, the goal isn't to win, but to communicate effectively, connect genuinely, and add value through your response. Conclusion, bringing it all together. Throughout this audiobook, we've explored powerful techniques to help you think fast and talk smart in any situation. Let's bring these insights together and see how they work as an integrated system. We began by addressing anxiety, that universal challenge that can paralyze even the most knowledgeable among us. We learned that managing anxiety doesn't mean eliminating it, but rather channeling its energy productively through techniques like greeting your anxiety, reframing speaking as conversation, and becoming present-oriented. With anxiety under control, we explored the four-step process for effective spontaneous speaking. First, get out of your own way by letting go of perfectionism and allowing yourself to respond naturally. Remember the improv maxim, dare to be dull. When you lower the stakes, you often achieve your best results. Second, reframe speaking situations as opportunities rather than threats. This shift in perspective transforms how you physically and verbally respond, making you more open and connected. Third, slow down and truly listen before responding. As we learned, don't just do something, stand there is sometimes the most powerful approach. Fourth, use simple structures to organize your thoughts quickly. Frameworks like problem, solution, benefit, and what so what now. What provide reliable templates for clear, coherent responses. We then explored the power of yes and thinking, accepting and building upon ideas rather than negating them. This approach creates momentum and possibilities in your communication, helping you respond more fluidly and collaboratively. We discovered how storytelling can transform abstract points into memorable, emotional experiences. By building a story bank and practicing spontaneous storytelling, you can illustrate your points in ways that resonate deeply with your audience. Finally, we tackled the challenge of difficult questions and high-pressure situations, learning specific techniques for maintaining composure and responding effectively, even when caught off guard. The beauty of these techniques is that they work together synergistically. Managing anxiety helps you get out of your own way. Seeing speaking as an opportunity makes you a better listener. Using structure frees your mind to focus on content. Yes, and thinking generates momentum that carries you forward. Storytelling brings your points to life. And preparation for difficult questions builds the confidence to be truly present. With practice, these skills become second nature. You'll find yourself responding more confidently, connecting more authentically, and communicating more effectively in all kinds of spontaneous situations. Remember that mastering spontaneous speaking is a journey, not a destination. Each time you apply these techniques, you'll learn something new about yourself and your communication style. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and keep practicing. The next time you're put on the spot, whether in a meeting, a social gathering, or a high-stakes presentation, remember that you have the tools to think fast and talk smart. Take a deep breath, get out of your own way, see the opportunity, listen carefully, use structure, and respond with authenticity and service. Your voice matters, your ideas matter, and with the techniques we've explored in this audiobook, you can ensure that they're heard and understood, even in the most challenging spontaneous speaking situations. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now go out there and speak with confidence, clarity, and connection, no matter how little time you have to prepare.